Let's get started. So, hi everyone, I'm Richard. I'm from Incubite, and I welcome you all to the Software Craftspeople India community, also known as SCI. So, basically, SCI is a non-profit organization dedicated to connecting individuals with software craftsmanship mindset. Our mission is to foster a community where members can improve their skills and also get better at their software craft. We organize talks, roundtables, and workshops aimed at enhancing the craft of software development. Throughout the year, we invite several industry experts to share their insights and expertise with our community. Incubite is the founder and also the sponsor of this community. We are a company that is focused on delivering well-crafted software solutions. And a bit about today's speaker, we have Sven Peters with us. So, Sven is a developer advocate, a keynote speaker, former programmer, and also a tech marketer. He's been studying teamwork for the last 15 years. He's been working in Denmark, Germany, and the US as a software team lead and a developer advocate. For Atlassian and MongoDB, he managed event content teams, produced several product keynotes, and defined the brand message for and beyond their customer conferences. Sven also regularly speaks at small and large international developer conferences like DevOps, Java Zone, and many more. If you tune into anyone, you would be able to find one of the talks from Sven Peters over there. So, and with that, let's welcome Sven to the SCI community. Once again, welcome Sven. So before I hand it over to Sven, everyone, we'll be having the Q&A at the end. So you can keep your questions ready or post it in the chat, which will be taken up at the end of the session. Sven, the stage is all yours.
Oh, how exciting. Thank you very much for having me here in this community. Totally pumped to talk about developer joy today. Let me just start and share my screen. So entire screen, we take this one and here we go. So let me know, can you see the screen?
Yep.
Someone? Yeah, okay, great. So let's put that on. All right. Let me just dive right in. Developer joy, right? So you might think why is this person from Atlassian actually you also see just the slides, not the preview, right? So I'm just sure that I'm sharing the right screen here.
Yep, just the slides.
Perfect. Why is this person from Atlassian actually talking about developer joy? As developers, we have actually the best job in the world, right? We create software, we create value for customers and get direct feedback from customers. It's just the best job in the world. And I tend to agree, right? But a lot of things have actually changed recently or the last 10 years in terms of software development, right? If you look back, right, software was totally differently written and executed 10 years ago, right? So when I became actually software developer in the year 2000, the cloud didn't exist, right? So no one was actually, it was just a couple of web pages. But now actually we as software developers need to learn how to deal with cloud toolings, right? How to configure cloud toolings and different concepts of cloud toolings, right? And then everything gets now containerized. So everything runs into little small containers, and we have to deal with things like if the container is down, right? So what are we doing, right? Where are the log files that were inside those containers? So all of these things requires a new way of thinking, and we had to learn this in the last 10 years. And now everyone says us yeah, we need to develop small little microservices. But we also have to think, and it gets more complex, with the more microservices we build, our system gets more complex. And what happens if I call something at the other end of my software, a microservice, and the service is not there anymore? We have to take care about that too nowadays in software development. How do we design our APIs? So all of this came on top of software development. And don't let me start with security and governance, right? If now our software is running in the cloud, so we need to secure that more, right? We need to make sure that not nasty people will just break into our software. So we needed to learn all this paradigm around security and governance. And thank you very much, Werner Vogel from AWS, right? He coined the term you build it, you run it, right? Now we are not just responsible for building the software, taking the requirements and building the software. Now we are also responsible for running it in real production, right? On what we need to think about observability and what happens. We have to be on call, right? If a microservice goes down, someone has to look at that. So all of these things, and don't get me wrong, I think like we all changed it for the better. It's great that we now have this whole responsibility around the whole software development lifecycle, but it includes a lot of more cognitive load from the developer side. We have to keep more things in our head. Our systems get more complex and all those things. And obviously, right, that we're now taking on more jobs in software development, our productivity seems to go down, even though it's not going down because we're doing more, right? Um, the outcome, the software that we deliver is a little bit less probably because we're doing all these other things too. And our managers keep saying like, oh yeah, but 10 years ago, you have actually delivered more features, right? How can we get back to this great productivity that we had, right? And I said, yeah, well, you put it all on our shoulders, right? Well, of course productivity goes down. So where does this obsession come from for productivity? And I want to like make a little bit of a time travel with you, and we travel back in time. No worries, I will take you back to 2024 in just like 5 minutes or so. But we're traveling back in time now, 126 years back in time. When we want to look where the root of productivity, this obsession with productivity, metrics, and all this came from. And we're traveling to the Bethlehem Steel Factory in the year 1898. And in the year 1898, actually, the Bethlehem Steel Factory had some productivity issues. There were some factories that were way more productive than the Bethlehem Steel Factory. So at that time, we didn't have consulting services, actually, that we could call in, like McKinsey or the Boston Consulting Group or whatever management services, consulting services are available now. We couldn't do that back in the days. So what this Bethlehem Steel Factory actually did, they had one person. His name was Frederick Winslow Taylor. Some of you might have heard of Taylorism as a thing, right? He's the one that coined this Taylorism. So, but he just like came in and just like observed. He just like looked at what are the factory workers are actually doing, pulling out his stopwatch, right? And saying, okay, let me just like see how long tasks are taking so we can actually measure the improvement, right? So he just like saw, okay, some things are not as good organized, right? So we have to put some stations next to each other so the workflow makes much more sense, right? And we are more productive with that. Another thing that he actually noticed was when the workers were shuffling coal, right? Coal was falling left and right from the shuffles. So what he actually did, what Frederick Winslow Taylor did, actually looked at the shuffles, and they were made for shuffling soil, not for shuffling coal. So he gave them custom-made shuffles. So tooling was also an important factor for the productivity of the Bethlehem Steel Factory, right? And then also what he noticed is that people could carry more actually in the morning than in the evening, right? Obviously, you're stronger, you're not exhausted, you can carry more in the morning than in the evening. So what he did actually to optimize that, he gave the workers more breaks in between to recover from the heavy carrying. And all over the day, they could carry actually more heavier things than without those breaks. So great, right? He just like optimized a whole bunch of stuff here. And he actually increased the productivity of the factory workers, of the factory outcome by 400%. Wow, great. So every development manager that I know wants to have that increase, of course, right? But hey, everything comes actually with a flip side. It's not that it comes, everything, this 400% comes for free. He introduced also new roles. So the workers actually, they were not supposed to think anymore, right? They were doing all this repetitive tasks, but there needed to be some people who thought about just like, well, should we optimize? How are we measuring things? And that's where Frederick Winslow Taylor introduced the managers, right? They were actually doing the thinking, right, for the workers. might sound familiar to some software developers of you, right? But this is actually 126 years ago, right? So a long time ago. Now, what are actually traveling back to 2024? How are we actually? Where's our stopwatch, right? There's no manager staying with a stopwatch next to us saying, okay, code faster or something. But how are we actually measuring the developer productivity? And we recently did a survey, and the number one thing that people are doing to measure something about productivity is this: lines of code. How many lines of code have the developer added? And we all know that this is just like not a good measurement for the productivity. I can add a lot of lines of code without actually being super productive, right? And then the next thing that people are doing is like, okay, let's not measure lines of code, but measure the how many issues we have actually, and we move into the done column, right? Also, this is maybe a better thing than lines of code, yeah, but there are smaller and larger issues, right? So people are saying, okay, let's do this here, story points, right? We want to increase the story points we are reaching throughout an iteration, a sprint, or make it a little bit easier than story points, Fibonacci numbers. Not everyone's familiar with that. Let's do it with t-shirt sizes, small, medium, large, extra large stories, right? But this is also not a good measurement for productivity, because these things are actually measuring, or they are just like estimates. They don't measure how productivity. I can say, oh, this is a small story, and then it takes me a week. And I can say, oh, this is a large story, and it takes me just a few hours, right? Happened to me as a software developer, that I was just like not just like I was just like wrongly estimating. But people are getting smarter, right? So they say, okay, what about cycle time? Cycle time is probably also something nice to measure, right? How long does it take from idea to delivery, or deployment frequency? Well, guess what? Assume that we have the perfect measurement, right? They say, okay, now we can actually measure. Our productivity is 5.6 or whatever, in whatever metric or unit it's going to be measured. I don't know. But let's assume that we have found that. What is happening then is, of course, we want to get more productive. We want to get faster. We want to get more story points in, or more whatever in, right? And this is still the thinking of Frederick Winslow Taylor, right? To optimize that numbers, right? Um, so I think we have a problem in our industry if we do it like that, right? We don't respect the developers, and we don't respect that developer needs a good experience, for a good environment for developing good software. And that's why everyone is talking these days about increasing improving the developer experience. And I'm a super fan of their work. Makes much more sense, right? Happy developers are productive developers. If you have a good experience, you are probably also a productive developer, right? But there are people coming up now with frameworks. They also jump consultant people, right? And they give you these frameworks, which looks just like, okay, if you optimize the team satisfaction, or this increases or decreases the team satisfaction, pull these levers. This is not how every team is operating, right? We can't put the developer experience into those frameworks. Or I don't know if you heard about the McKinsey story. They came up with this framework here to measure developer productivity. And their story points are still, if you look at it in the middle, there's still story points completed in there. So we still are going back to this Taylorism side. So that's why we actually Atlassian say, okay, let's call it differently. Let's call it developer joy. Because remember that times when you became a developer and you enjoy what you're doing. You were working maybe on an open source project or your own little project, and you coded until the middle of the night, super enjoying what you're doing. You didn't get tired. You were just like passionate about that. And developers are passionate about their craft. If you look at how many people are taking time to spend time on open source projects and taking effort besides their working time. So how can we spark that joy in our daily work? This is the question that we should ask ourselves. How can we get back to that feeling that we had when we started software development. That's the reason why we became software developers, because it is great to develop software. So, and last thing we were thinking about, okay, how can we improve the developer joy? First thing is we want to work with great quality code. So this is one thing, right? If I work with great quality code, I enjoy what I'm doing, right? We want to improve the progress, right? We don't want to wait for other teams. We just like want to a task should flow through our systems with great joy. And then also what we want to create is, of course, great value for our customers. If our customers come back to us and say, Sven, we love what you just delivered. We enjoy what we do. I'm enjoying what I'm doing, right? I say, wow, I'm proud of that, right? Taking pride in your work, right? This is also what you want to improve. Okay, I tell you now a couple of stories that happened at Atlassian where the developers came in and says, okay, we need to do something, right? We need to improve the way we work. We need to add more joy to our software development processes and what happens on a daily life. So I bring that to you and tell you some stories. And let's talk about quality first. And if we want to increase the quality, we're thinking about code reviews, right? I hope you're all doing code reviews on a daily basis, right? I'm sure you're doing code reviews, right? Yeah, I hope everyone is nodding now. Can't see you, but I'm pretty sure everyone is nodding now. But there's this thing with code reviews that a little bit of reluctant doing code reviews, a little bit of holding back, and then say, oh, I don't want to put out my code to all my coworkers to get them reviewed, right? Let's take a look at that, why that is, right? So assuming that I have added these lines of code here, it's a pretty easy function. It's just like a while loop that I put in there, nothing really fancy. It's just like super easy. And I put this out in a pull request, right? Invite my coworkers, and the first comment that I get is this here. What the fuck's that? So, oh God. Okay. I have to deep briefly if I see that comment. And I said, no, okay, let's just like take a step back and says, what do you mean by that, right? Tell me more, right? And that person comes back and says, this code is ugly. I said, okay, I don't want to do code reviews anymore, right? I'm done. I review my code myself or whatever, right? Get an AI to review my code. I don't want to put it out to humans if I get these nasty comments, right? But we want to be polite. We want to learn also and said, okay, why do you think this code is ugly? And then this person come back and said, it would be nicer if you'd use a for loop. Yeah, while loop will do the job, but what do you mean by nicer, right? I want to learn from it. So first thing, if you are this kind of person that does this comments on pull request, here's 4 words for you. Don't be a jerk, right? Don't do that, right? You just like shy away people from code reviews. Just be nice if you answer things, right? So I know like who has been bullied by a jerk here recently. Probably a lot of you can say, yeah, if I just like think about the last 3 months, there were 1 or 2 situations that happened there. But those reviewers are actually the reason why people hate code reviews. That's why people don't like code reviews. When we know code reviews are important, not just for the quality of the code, but also to learn about other areas of the code, right? So the Jira team actually, maybe they didn't have a jerk on their team, but they were looking at it and say, okay, what should we do about these things? How can we make code reviews more pleasant? And they were looking at it, looking at the reviewer, right? The reviewer is in this protected bubble. You are protected, right? You can throw errors at your coworkers. You shouldn't throw errors at your coworkers because the author actually they open themselves up. Here's my work, right? I'm opening to you, right? Give me feedback, but don't hurt me, please. So it's not hurting the author is actually top priority. So the first thing they came up with some rules, the Jira team. So this first thing like assume competence. We hire people with a reason, right? We just like do a lot of interviews to make sure we have the best people that we can hire. So we hire competent people. So assume that the author is competent, right? The next thing is be constructive in your feedback. This code looks ugly. That's not a constructive comment, right? Be just like tell the people why do you think like this code is ugly, or why do you think like this could be improved, right? And then also explain your reasoning. A for loop would be nicer. Nicer is not a good reason, right? Explain why do you think like a for loop would work better in that case than a while loop. What are the problems? just like to get the author and learn that the author can learn from you. So the team came up with a couple of more of these rules. They call it review etiquettes, and they wrote it all the things down into a Confluence page, right? So not just like the reviewers etiquette, but also the author's etiquette. So also say, as an author, you also have responsibility to review your code before you put it under code review, things like that. So they actually wrote everything down. And once you now get bullied by someone, you can say, hey, that's not fun, that's not cool, right? We wrote the things down. These are the rules we agreed to. So making code reviews pleasant, really, making it less bullish, increases your developer joy. You enjoy more what you're doing, right? You enjoy working with that team even more. All right. So next story is about the Confluence team. And if you think about it, code review, great. Everyone agreed. We merged it back to the main branch, and now our automatic test kick off, right? So let's run this test, right? Our unit test, our integration tests, and then test turns red. And you say, oh, what should we do, right? But it's not life or death. I mean, it's good that that the test turns red and that you captured some problem here, right? What you do next is actually you look at the code, right? What did I change? Why did this test turn out red? Let's take a look at it. And you look closer, and you can't find what this test failed. You look at the log files. What was it? Why did this test fail? Look back at the code, and you can't find a correlation. You don't know. So what's the next thing that you're going to do? Well, spend 20 minutes on reviewing, just pressing just like, oh, let's rerun the test, right? And let's have a look, and boom, test is green, all good. We can go on, right? No. We just discovered a flaky test. Flaky tests are nasty. Oh, it's time for a commercial. We have a break, and I'll be back right after the break here. Don't call. We haven't got a proper product that is a flaky test detector. But the Confluence team actually wrote one, right? So they wrote this flaky test detector, and it's a super simple thing. Like once you create a pull request and the build and test kicks off, right, and the test fails, the flaky test detector says, hey, let me just like rerun those tests, right? And then they'll rerun the test, and then one of the reruns, actually, the test passes. And the flaky test detector says, just discovered a flaky test. Great. All right. So what the flaky test detector does then is just like automatically skip the test because it's flaky. And then also add a comment to the pull request. Someone has to look at it. Someone has to fix it. And then also, yes, get a Slack message in the team chat that there's a flaky test detected and the team has to look at it. So everyone is aware of that. So giving people better tooling, and this is something that the Confluence team built in their extra time, actually helps to increase developer joy, right? It's not joyful to just like sit there for 20 minutes looking at code. Actually, I think the Confluence team in the last 3 months, I looked at the stats, flaky test detector came in a couple of times. So if we assume that it takes 20 minutes until you discover that's a flaky test, they saved over 500 engineering hours just by that. So the less debug frustrations means more developer joy, right? What I love when I'm developing is when I'm in the flow. And flow is for me super important, right? The situation when you are just like looking at code. You have the design in your whole head, right? The whole code design, and you say, I call this one, and then I call this one, and it makes you are right in this zone, right, of writing code. You can't see that it's dark outside. You look outside. That's when did that happen? So this is a great situation actually to be in. But unfortunately, software development is not just around coding. It's also building and testing, and then also deploying, right? We all know that. And we can optimize the hell out of that, right? Make that shorter, right? We can go from building and testing from hours to minutes to optimize that, just like run parallel tests and build, put everything together, or deployment, right? Just like deploy one microservice that you change and the whole monolith. So you can just like do a lot of here to optimize that time. But there's one stage in between that takes a long time, much longer than these build and test and deploy things. And that's the review phase. It actually can take days until someone looks at your code and says, approved. So also some other Confluence team, actually, from the Confluence development team, had that problem. And they were measuring how long it does it take from opening a pull request to merging it back to the main branch on average. And what they found is just like it took them 3 days on average, right? From opening to merge a pull request. You might say, yeah, that's normal. That's actually a good number already. But the Confluence team wasn't really happy. They wanted to deliver value fast to the customer, right? I wanted to have feedback loop. And not only that, right? They were just like 3 days working on something else, then get the feedback and coming back to the work they did 3 days ago. And they just like, it took time until they were back and say, oh yeah, I remember that is what I was doing 3 days ago. Now I can go and fix it. So we needed to, the goal of the team was to shorten that time, right? To make that time shorter. And if you look at that, so these are just like, assuming these are just like 3 open pull requests with a few reviewers that need to review that pull request. It's not that the people don't want to review, right? They said, they're just like, maybe they're busy with other things, right? So the team lead, Punit Arora here, he came actually up with the idea of saying, okay, I know you are busy, right? But I will remind you that you are sitting on open pull request and your coworkers are actually waiting for the result, right? So we're pinging everyone in the morning before everyone went into the flow zone, right? Everyone in the morning. So you can start or kick off your day with reviewing that open pull request so your coworkers can actually go on, right? And as it is, right, we are all developers, and it says Punit, the team said Punit, and we know it's helping us, but it's not really your job, so we replace you. We replace you by a bot. So they build a bot and they call it, funnily, the Punit bot, right? And now the Punit bot is actually pinging everyone in the morning, and reminding everyone to just like, you have an open pull request. I know you were just like busy, or you open it and you said, oh, that's a lot of work. And you close it again. Also, this was a learning that the team took, right? That we have to make pull requests to change that much smaller, because if it's just like a long, people will close it. If it's just like a long change set, people will close it actually and review it when they have more time. So this is also some learning that we took. It's not just the reminder, it's also some learnings that we took alongside to just like be aware that the length from opening a pull request to closing it is something that we want to shorten as a team. And they went actually down from 3 days to 1.2 days, still some optimization there, but they are pretty happy right now with cutting it more than half the time, right? So faster reviews actually means less wait time for you as an author of the code, right? You can just like, and less wait time also for the customer for a feature, right? And that means also more developer joy. I don't go back and just like have to come back into the code. It's just like more developer joy that they experience. So flow is actually super important, right? Flow, we want to have actually frictionless flow between teams, right? In the team, workflows pretty well normally, or the team can optimize it. But what about between different teams, right? How is the flow between different teams, right? And I compare now flow, software development flow, with a little bit of a traffic flow. So I looked at junctions and simulated and a simulation with some traffic junctions. And So this is a junction with no rules at all. People have to find their way through. So the junction actually, there are no rules. So how many cars can pass that junction? In that simulation, 191 cars per minute can pass that junction. So assuming you have no rules at all, probably if you just like work in a small startup and you need to call marketing and say, hey, or need to call the designer, the one designer that you have, and say, I need this button actually now. I cannot design it my own. So just like jump forth and back without any processes at all. This works maybe good for startups, but if you grow larger, that's probably not the best way to do it, right? To do this ad hoc thing. So we need to be a little bit more coordinated. So what are we doing with traffic? Well, we add actually traffic lights, right? So let's look at that simulation with traffic lights. You can see just like some cars go full on, right? They can just like accelerate, and some cars need to just like stop. And the traffic flow actually increases 235 cars per minute. Great, right? We increase the cars per minute here because people can go, or the cars can go full time. But this is not a pleasant process actually for software developers. If we just like have to wait and get the whole design maybe, right, and then we can go full speed, that's not a good use of our time too. So we are more supposed to do a little bit more in an agile way. And if I look at traffic, I look at roundabouts, right? So you can see this, like once there's a slot somewhere, if the designer has some time slot, they will slot the work in, right? Not a talk. They will just like slot the work in. Same as here, and you can see there's also a fast, or you could see there's also a fast lane, just like some cars are just like can go the fast lane and can go faster in the circle, right? But this is not all, right? So this is more the agile way of working, right? We're just like planning for the sprint and then putting everything into the sprint and the circle, and then next sprint planning, next sprint. All good. But there's one thing that is even better than the roundabout, which has a traffic flow of 360 cars, so increasing per minute. It is the stack interchange, right? And if you've just like been on this motorways, you know that you don't have to stop. You just like merge automatically into the lane, right? So everything is in flow the whole time. How do we get that into software development, right? We want that flow that the traffic that the cars have here, right? 1,099 cars per minute. Woo, right? So we need to just like make our teams actually more autonomous, right? We need autonomous teams that can run in their own pace and don't have to stop and wait for other teams, right? They need to have the capability, right, of these autonomous teams. Of course, they need to be highly aligned, right? They need to be aligned. We can't just like have random teams just like doing whatever they want, autonomous teams. But how do you get those autonomous teams? We get it to cross-functional, right? We add some cross-functional roles into our teams, some roles that are not developer, but that we need in our team, right? Like a designer, add that to our team, like QA person, like ops person, right? Or product manager, add them to our team so we can actually run at our own pace and get our own jobs done faster. Well, sounds good in theory. In practice, the Trello team was actually struggling with that. They just were looking at QA people, right? And if you just like want to add a QA people to your team, there needs to be QA people available, of course, right? But if you look at the ratio, how many QA people we have at Atlassian, right? The ratio from QA to developer is 1 to 30, right? And our teams are not 30 people in size. So this one QA person has to split between 5 teams or 6 teams, depending on the size, right? And has to jump from team to team, which is also not very pleasant. But then we have the bottleneck again of this QA person, right? So we were looking at the problem a little, the Trello team were looking at the problem a little bit differently. They were saying, okay, the developers are already doing automated tests, right? Unit tests and integration tests and all those things. Well, the QA people were doing the exploratory test, the manual test of the software, right? And they said, we need to do something and we need to give the exploratory test to the developers, right? And QA is not quality assurance anymore, it's quality assistance. So we're helping the developers to become better testers so they can test their software themselves and then remove that bottleneck of a QA person, right? And they invented something they called QA kickoffs, right? So this is for the developer that develops one feature and needs to just like test the feature themselves. So just like start off, a QA kickoff is done before we actually start with development. We get the user story, we're doing a QA kickoff, right? We just like QA kickoff, we come together with a QA person, the quality assistant person. The quality assistant person helps us to write down a test plan, step-by-step plan. How would we test exploratory, manually, the software once it's ready, right? Once the user story is completed. And then the QA person leaves and the developer implements the user story, do the testing themselves, runs a demo, and that's maybe a point where the QA person can come back, but deploys it. So no bottleneck anymore for the QA to just like approve the changes. This is the workflow that we implemented, and it works brilliantly for us. The developers become more aware of how to test software and also what to look at when actually writing the software. So the QA person doesn't come back at the end and say, oh, have you tested this? And oh, I never thought about this, right? Because they talked before the implementation about that feature, right? So this is one thing that the quality assistant crew is doing. What they also do is organizing blitz testing. So assume you have a larger feature that you developed as a team or as a person, and then you want to test it, right? So the whole team comes together and test the hell out of this new feature. And this is organized by the quality assistance team. They take all the feedback, the problem that you found, right? In the splits test takes you maybe 1 to 2 hours, right? And then saying, okay, this is critical for the release and this is not critical. We can fix that later. Or this is nice to have, but we don't need to do that, right? So this is what the quality assistant people do. And then also they're responsible for the whole testing environment. So we run our tests, setting up the environments and making sure that the environments are available, the databases are filled with data that makes sense. So this is also what the quality assistant people do, what the developers don't have to do. So all of this means, of course, less developer cognitive load. We don't have to think about these setups and this blitz testing setup and the things, right? And we can move faster. With QA kickoffs, we can move faster, we remove bottlenecks, we don't have to wait, less frustration. So all of this is more developer joy at the end. So coming now to different roles in software development, like the product and the developers, right? Like the QA and the developers. Sometimes it feels like we are all living on different planets and looking differently at the software we're creating. But we need to just like talk the same language, right? We need to speak the same language. We need to work closer together in order to deliver the right things for our customers, right? And here's a story that I experienced. Actually, it's a real story that I experienced during my time as a software developer. I got this user story on my desk, right? As a user, I want to export the data so I can have it in an Excel file. Some product manager gave it to me. I said, okay, great, that's an easy thing, right? I have a library, I put in a button, pressing, Excel file done, right? So I just like exported the user data, fine, right? Then gave it to my product managers to just like say, hey, here, it's done, you can take a look at it. And then the product manager says, okay, no, it's just like too much data in there, right? I don't want to have the creation date. I want to have the update date and all those things. Just like the data is enough. I just like want to have the important data. And I said, okay, you could have told me that, right? So new user story. As a user, I want to export the important data. You can have it in an Excel file. Great. So I did that, right? Just like we defined which data they wanted to export and so on and so on. Then I just like gave it to my product manager, and the product manager says, oh, great. It's exactly the data that I need. But I didn't know that there's a difference between Excel file and CSV file. I actually need it in a CSV file. Is that a big deal? I said, no, of course not, but I have to touch the software again, right? Okay, good. I can go back to the task and do it again, right? So new user story. As a user, I want to export the important data so I can have it in a CSV file. Great. So next step, right? Gave it to the person, CSV file. The product manager says, perfect. It's exactly what I needed. I can export the data out of our system and import it into our SAP system. I said, what are you doing? You're importing it into SAP? There's an API I could call and shuffle the data over, right? We wouldn't have done this export import. You should have gave me the whole story, right? What do you want to do? Okay, frustrating moment. Maybe this is a little bit too much cycles, but some of you might have experienced the same thing, right? It's not really clear why are we doing this, right? The why is not already clear, but the product people, I don't want to blame them. They're doing a lot of research, measurements, interviews, experiments, prototypes to think about the why. The problem is that they then press it into a small little user story, and we should build the running software, understanding the why and solving the problem for the customer. That obviously doesn't work, right? It's full of failures because there's so much information in the beginning, and we try to squeeze it into just like little information to have the running software and solve the problem for our customers. So the Jira team was actually looking at that, and they said, okay, we need to have better collaboration. The developers needs to more understand the why. The product people needs to just like see what we are building, why we are building it. So they were closely looking at all the phases that the software development lifecycle has, and they were looking at the make phase. So this is actually where the developers are building the software. They are writing the code for the software, right? And this is really where we create the software. But there's more phases, right? The wonder phase, the problem phase. This is where the product managers think about what's the problem, talk to the customers. Then we have an explore phase, right? Where we just like say, okay, we know now the problems. There are several solutions how we can solve that. What's the best solution for the customers? And don't forget the impact phase, right? The measurements, right? How is the customer using it? Did we solve the problem for the customer? And we don't want to involve developers 100% in all those phases. Remember, I talked about cognitive load, but they need to be just like involved in some of those phases a little bit more. To understand the why, to have less frustration. Sounds a little bit intuitive, right? Because you think like, oh, they're doing now more again, right? But it helps to understand the problem to solve the right things. It's not less frustration and more developer joy at the end, right? And the product people are probably involved more into the wonder phase, the impact phase, the solution phase. Maybe we should tackle as a team, right? So we defined actually certain milestones where we say, okay, if the problem is defined, right? We're doing a project kickoff. So the product people, the product managers, they're inviting all the developers, all the QA people, all the designers, everyone, to just like the operation people to just understand what are we building, why are we building it, why is this important? In the explore phase, we're building prototypes. It's not just Figma prototypes that the product people build. It's also, and designers, it's also prototypes to see if this is technically feasible, just like trying things out, right? Building a prototype. And then during the make phase, and I talk about that in a bit, we are running demos. So showing the software to the rest of the organization or to the rest of the whole team, the broader team. And then in the impact phase, we're doing something called goal signal measures. We just like compare the goals with the signals that we've seen and the measurements that we have from the customer usage. But let's talk a little bit about demos, right? Demos are demoing the current software version, right? The current thing that we have frequently, let's say every week or every other week, to the stakeholders, to QA, design, product managers, to just like give them possibility to give us feedback and say we are on the right path. So demo sessions are actually open, so everyone can join. We want to have everyone in that demo session. They are outcome oriented, so we don't show implementation details, show how we set up the database or whatever. We show customer value, really value for the customer, so it's valuable for all the people that are sitting in those demos. And this is the important thing. We're sitting together, and don't get me wrong, we're not sitting together anymore in that room. This picture is just like 6-7 years old when we're doing that. We are all running it in a remote session, but we discuss and challenge the solution that we see. To just like say, sometimes product people come in and say, oh, well, this is now how it looks. Give me that, and I show it the customer. Let's do the demo, and I show it the customer if this is really solving their problems. So we get early feedback in that loop, right? And not just at the end where I say, no, this is totally bullshit. We have to redo it again. And then also we celebrate. We're sitting together in one Zoom room. We're recognizing great work. If we have a milestone, we release the milestone. We can celebrate together because we're all sitting in the same boat, right? We are all trying to create value for the customers. So this means actually less rework frustration and more developer joy. Now, I showed you a couple of stories from Atlassians, how they actually tackled the developer joy problem. But what did we really solve? Can we measure it? Actually, what would Frederick Winslow Taylor say? Actually, right? There wasn't Frederick Winslow Taylor that, but it was Peter Drucker. Peter Drucker said actually this year, if you can't measure it, you can't improve it. And there's something right in there, right? How do we know that we got better, right? You maybe saw that the Punit bot seemed to improve the what we measured 3 days to 1.2 days, but not for everything, right? We didn't measure everything, right? If you don't know what to measure actually in your software development, right? Here's the thing, right? It's proven if you're running microservices or something, start with a DORA metrics. These are proven metrics that improve your software development. Just like measure your baseline and try to go from there. But not don't hold a little bit back. Because not everything in this DORA metrics, and if you haven't heard about DORA metrics, just like take a look at that. It's change failure rate, right? How many failures are in your changes? Just like what the ratio there, time to restore. If a deploy fails, how much time does it take to restore? Lead time for changes, how long does it take to implement a change until from just like implementing the code to running software, and then also deployment frequency. How often do you deploy? And this is a good thing for microservices to measure these things. But if you're, for example, doing mobile software, right, for mobile for mobile devices, deployment frequency is probably not that important for you. So you need to look what is important for your team. Where is your team actually struggling? Take that metric and measure that and trying to improve that. And don't take all kinds of measurements that you can do. Take those measurements that you really want to improve as a team, right? And we have a tool for that called Compass at Atlassian. It's our own tool. It was our own platform until we released it, and made it a tool for everyone to be available. And that's actually where we have our measurements, right? And then also we implement the baselines directly in, so we can see if we fall beneath the baseline, this metric turns red. Isn't it great, right? There's one problem with that. Someone has to look at those, right? Someone has to look at those, and you need to just like have a thing, right? Have a practice, how you take action on that. How do you find that and then see if it's improved that? And maybe this isn't really a problem, right? So we are doing weekly meetings where the team comes together and looks at the metrics. And if you see that deployment frequency goes down, you can say, oh my God, we have a problem. But if you take the context around it, right, it's maybe not a problem. It's maybe that you're working on a very, very complicated part of the subsystem and it takes you time to figure everything out. And of course, we don't deploy that often because we want to be sure that we fix the damn thing, right? So that the deployment frequency goes down, that's okay, right? It should go up when you're done with that complicated subsystem again. But for now, it's okay. You don't have to worry too much, right? So we're tracking actually those also in Compass, where we can document what went well, and it's a little bit of kind of a retrospective but especially for metrics, right? So see how the software development is going, right? I told you should look at the team metrics, but there's actually one thing, and I lied to you. One thing that Atlassian is measuring globally, and that's change the business. How much time do we spend on creating new features that change the business for our customers, right? That's what we're measuring. And unfortunately, we don't spend 100% of the time on that. We also need to spend time on keeping the lights on or running the business. There's also time spent with that. And we came up with a ratio, just like looking at different teams. Some teams are different than others, of course, right? Some teams can, just like if they work on a new product, they probably spend more time on changing the business. People that work on Jira, it's a very old product, that also needs to spend maybe more time on keeping the lights on. And some teams inside of Jira are probably also more time changing the business and keeping the lights on. We just like have some guardrails. We set some guardrails here. And it's 55% of time spent for changing the business and 35% time of keeping the lights on. So maximum 35% and minimum 55%. That's important, right? And now you say, Sven, you can't do the math. 55 plus 35, that's 90, right? Where's the rest 10%? And that's true. But you saw just in the presentation that Atlassian teams are fixing their own problems in their team, right? And that's 10% of the time. 10% of the time, team are allowed to fix to work on their own problems. We're tracking that, as I said, right? You can see here the purple one. That's actually the developer productivity or developer joy section, right? And it's varying from month to month, but we want to know actually that teams spend time on there and want to make sure that teams spend time on there. Now, GitHub actually did an experiment they called the Good Day Project. This has also to do with measurement and how it impacts. So what they were doing actually, they were asking, how good was your day, right? How productive were you today? And some days you feel very productive, and other days you don't, right? Of course, yeah. And then they would just say, okay, let's correlate with the data that we see, right? How many activities per day did people do? And they couldn't find a correlation between how people felt and what the data was showing, right? So poor Octocat here. And it is because we're trying hard to measure software development life cycles, but we look at things like the Bethlehem Steel Factory or car manufacturers, right? Where you just like have everything on a production line, right? Idea takes 12 days, plan 3 days, code 1 day, and then deploy 2 days or whatever, right? But software development is a creative thing, right? We can't treat software development as a production line. It is not, right? Sometimes we're doing things new each day, right? It's not like we're putting in the tire or the steering wheel always, right? It's not like that. We have to reinvent things that have never done before for each day. So we can't treat it like a production line. And that's why it's important to measure what is important, but don't make important what you can measure. That's a great quote from Robert McNamara that he came up with. And it's so true. So, but how do we know what is important? How do we know what is really important? What's bothering developers? We can measure a lot of things. Well, it's the easy answer to that. You should just ask your developers. If you ask your developers, they 100% can tell you, oh, right, yeah, the CCI pipeline is, the CDCI pipeline is actually broken, right? That's just like taking too much time, or we spend too less time on improving, just like working on technical debt, right? It's biting us in the ass at the end, right? So developers have an opinion. Listen to them. They tell you the truth. So we actually came up with a survey. We called the Developer Joy Survey, and we asked these questions here. So, how satisfied are you with your speed to ship quality code? How satisfied are you actually with your waiting time, waiting for other teams, waiting for systems, and so on and so on? How satisfied are you with your execution independence? That you can just like execute independently as a team, right? And don't have to wait for other teams. How satisfied are you with your access to tools, processes, and practices? Do you have the right tools at hand, the right processes? Are you missing something? How about your effort of managing external standards like government, security and governments, and all those things, right? How satisfied are you with managing your code pipeline infrastructure, everything that you have to plumb, right? Are you spending too much time on that, right? What about ramp up time? If you have new developers, right? What about the ramp up time? How satisfied are you with that? And most importantly, how is your developer satisfaction overall, right? So we put together these metrics, these questions, and ask people regularly, what do you think here on that, right? How satisfied are you, right? And people can be satisfied, but it might not be important for them, right? It might not be relevant for them. So, for example, ramp up time, right? How satisfied are you with the ramp up time? You can be super satisfied, but in the last 2 years you didn't have a new team member, so it's irrelevant for you. So also what we do is we ask, how important is that for your team, right? How important is that for your team? And out of these two measurements, we are calculating a so-called opportunity score. And you can see if you are just like in this white corridor, it's just like the satisfaction and the importance on this axis, right? So then you are just like in the balance. It's you're satisfied, but it's also kind of important, right? If you are below this white corridor, right? If the pink items here on that slide, right? Then you're getting, it's important and people are not satisfied in that area. And these are the things that you have to do something, right? And wait time is a problem. You need to look deeper, of course, into this wait time problem. So what do you mean by wait time? But you get a good picture, overall picture of what is working well and what are the most pressing things for your team to work on. So if you want to learn more about this, there's a developer experience survey play. So we have this team playbook. We wrote everything down about this, what you just saw, right? The questions, how you measure the opportunity score. Just like go.atlassian.com/developerjoy will bring you to that play, or this QR code here will bring you to that play. So first thing is, once you just like figured out what's the problem, you need to try to fix things, right? You need to just like find out, okay, how do we improve that? And you saw tons of examples what Atlassians were doing. We also have a platform team who's doing more things on the platform side. So maybe the Punit bot gets as popular that we put it later on the platform so everyone can use this. This is a platform team that's doing this. But the thing is, the developers saw a need and developed this Punit bot, right? And what's also important, if you find something that works for your team, is to spread the learnings. So also spreading the learnings. And as I said, like the Punit bot, just like, I think now there are 30, 40 teams that are using the Punit bot. So it made sense to put it on the platform, on our developer platform, developer experience platform. And you see just like they wrote a blog post about it to tell the world about that, what they just like did. Say, what was the need? How do they build it? And most importantly, how can you use that for your software development, for your software teams, right? So sum this up. I'm almost running out of time here. Take your measurements and your survey results. They go hand in hand. Survey results show you the bigger bubble, and the measurement shows you more the signals, right? That you are on the right way to improving things, right? Take those two things, right, and give those to your autonomous teams, right? They need to know how they are, right? It's not, you can run surveys and don't give it to your teams, not a good idea. Give those to the autonomous teams and then help them, let them try to fix things. Give them time actually from the daytime to try to fix things. As I said, we give them 10% of their time to really do something and improve their developer quality, the developer progress, and the developer value. And I always want to do a Venn diagram in my talks, and here it is, right in the middle. When you have great quality code, you just like go forward fast, right? You can just like develop very, very fast, and you create the right things for the customer. This is where developer joy is happening, right? This is really where the fun in development happens. And guess what? You are also productive. You will also be productive. So don't forget to create that fun, right? Don't forget to have fun in software development. We became software developer for a reason. And we need to bring back that fun into software development to improve our productivity at the end, right? And create value for the customer fast, right? Thank you very much. I hope you enjoyed this talk. I go now, it's just like 1 hour is over. I go now on to questions. If you have questions, just like keep them coming. Thank you so much for listening.
Thank you, Sven. Thanks a lot. That was an energetic and also wonderful session we had. And everyone, please to let your questions out either at the chat or just unmute yourself and then ask the questions again.
Hey Sven, excellent talk. Just a quick question. I see you had mentioned something around code reviews, and we are also quite passionate about trying to solve for code reviews and how they become an issue with productivity. Like, what are your thoughts about not having any async code reviews at all, and maybe use some other means to kind of solve the eliminate code reviews basically, if possible.
Eliminate code reviews. Oh wow. I think code reviews are good for quality and for learning about certain path in the code. What you could do, I mean, instead of just like running asynchronous code reviews, if you're doing, and that's also a question I get a lot during my talks, if you're doing pair programming or mob programming or whatever kind of just like sessions sitting together and do it in a tag team. You don't need code reviews, asynchronous code reviews anymore. That's just like that's what you don't do. But and it is actually the better way. But I've tried it a lot of times, and especially in this distributed world that we are now living in, it's not always possible to just like sit together with one person and work together on the code, and it's pretty energy draining. It costs a lot of energy to just like sit together and concentrate with two people on that code. So that's why I think like, yeah, there's a value in just like synchronous reviews, definitely, but it's not always possible. And then I think asynchronous code reviews is the next best thing to do. But just like, if I get your question right, and talking about asynchronous code reviews, skipping code reviews just like totally, I think we are missing an opportunity to give especially junior people feedback around their code, help them to improve their code, and also for me as a senior developer, learn of other parts of the code that I haven't seen anything, or making sure that code quality, overall quality, is at the same kind of standards that we have in our company.
Yeah, perfectly makes sense. Actually, when I said eliminate code reviews, I actually meant eliminate the async code reviews, because they end up like becoming a bottleneck to your progress, right? So yeah, makes sense.
Totally. Great, thanks.
Sven, I had a question. I know there's a question open in the chat, but it's along the same lines of synchronous versus asynchronous. So a lot of times developers complain about meetings, right? Too many meetings in the day, not enough time to have focus hours. So what are the things that you have seen working well for teams that you have learned?
Yeah. So there are a couple of things there that work well for teams. So I talked about demos, for example, right? And we went on to have also we're currently experimenting with that, asynchronous demos, for example, to avoid those meetings as demo meetings where everyone sits in and watches what we've done through the week. So also there, the developers are recording small little videos. We use Loom for that. And then we use the comment function and the reaction function to make it interactive. That is actually, that has went very well. We had this this goal of creating, I think 5,000 demos for the year. So it means like every 2 weeks, a team needs to create a demo, and we went far beyond. I think we now have 15,000, and the year isn't over yet. So it really helped us to remove that kind of meetings. Of course, you can remove and this practice now everyone is using. Designers are using it to explain their design, so they don't call in people for design meetings. They just like explain their ideas through videos, and everyone can watch them whenever they have time. When you're just like in between working with two talks. So this is important. This kind of sales meetings you can also avoid by just like having better project reports and all of this. Reserving time for real coding time, right? And real concentrating deep dive time where it is not allowed for the team to have a meeting, actually turn off Slack during that time or whatever, right? Whatever works for you. Maybe you want to communicate during that time, that's fine too. But to really have this concentration time and block out things, organize things. If you if you're working in a very distributed different time zones, it's harder to do this because you have meetings in the morning and some people get up in the US, then it's evening or whatever. Or I work a lot with Australia, which is my morning time zone. So it's really hard to do that. But if your core team works with similar time zone, also that is just like, then you can block out time during the day, actually, where you say, okay, now we have this communication time in the morning, and then afternoon. This is also what I did with my team. We said just like, okay, we have this do not disturb time, where we won't get disturbed. We had Slack set, no, not disturbing time, right? And there was just like one person responsible for answering all the questions that came up to the team. So in the team chat, every other person was just like shutting down everything. So we had this pool one support guy once a week. So there are certain things how you can just like avoid to have less meetings and say. Sometimes you also call. I'm passionate about just like removing meetings. Sometimes you also can just like what we are also doing is just like send me the information write it down on a page and I can read through it so I can prepare for the meeting. Some meetings are just like draining along. I just have 5 minutes in the meeting where it's important for me. So skip those meetings and just like be explicit about it and say, hey, I see there's nothing for me in the agenda today. I'm going to skip it. This all said is kind of a cultural thing also. You can't just like do it on your own. You have to openly communicate what you're doing and why you're doing it. But I think if you're just like working in a team, you can do a lot of things to try to avoid these kind of meetings.
All right. So for takeaways for me, I think try to pull out as many async elements from those meetings and try to eventually convert the whole thing async and then build the culture around it so that everyone is on the same page.
Yeah, and don't get me wrong, meetings are great also. I mean, that's the reason why we want to meet in person. We need this social interaction. And I think for ideation, for example, and just like trying to come up with new ideas and throw things in, I love meetings, but not for just like status updates or whatever, right? And just like everyone is reading through what have we done throughout the week. The page can do that in the same style much better.
Yep, makes sense. Thank you.
You're welcome.
We have one other question in the chat. So,
Great.
What are some key lessons you have learned from your experience with Atlassian and MongoDB that apply to today's rapidly evolving tech landscape?
What I learned, I think if I want to apply something to the currently evolving tech landscape and thinking about a lot about AI these days, is that we're just like constantly in change. We need to know what's going on in our tech landscape. You need to be aware of what's happening actually out there. You need to listen to audiobooks, to podcasts, inform yourself about just like what's going on, because the pace this industry is going is pretty fast, and AI will make it even accelerates this trend. So if you're not, I mean, we're all software developers, so hopefully we all aware of these AI trends, and we are currently trying it out, everyone, and see what can we do and what can't do. So because it is just like fast paced moving. That's what I experienced at MongoDB, with new database trends coming in. Much more data. How do we deal with all this data from these IoT services, and this live data? And now with AI, now we have this. What is the vector database? Why is the vector database good for AI? And what other possibilities are there? I think like we need to be on top of what's actually happening. And then coming back to the talk, what's also important is to not just like build software, but also think about our own processes. What can we improve? Take time out, because we are just like, if you're just like complaining all the time, it is hard, right? It is hard. It is energy draining. It's super hard. You want to just like see, we need to improve something here, not just complain, but also take the action. you are the driver, right? You are the software developers. You can drive that. I know there are company policies, and people are watching how many features you put out, and there's pressure. I know all this, but being openly about it and says, hey, we're taking this Friday morning or Friday afternoon or Monday morning or whatever time you take out for rethinking our processes. There's a good investment in time. I know it will probably slow down software development, but at the end, we will be much faster. And if you can't convince your boss, just like send them to me, and I will just like talk to them and show them the talk or whatever. And this is the thing that we saw at Atlassian. Our developer satisfaction was down to, I think, 49%, which is super, super bad. And everyone was complaining that we didn't crunch out new features. And now we're up to 79, 80%, still room for improvement. Don't saying that. And it's just, we never get to 100% developer satisfaction. But that is, we now see the benefits of what we invested 2 years or 1 year ago when we started this journey on developer joy. We see now that we just like developing better software, more aligned software, and developers are more happy about that. So just saying that this investment in time is totally worth it. So these are just like some things that I see in the industry that I've seen at MongoDB and I've seen at Atlassian.
So yeah, that was a great one. So the next question is related to quality assistance from SIA. So is it the same thing that we do during refinement while we are capturing the definition of done, or is there something more to it?
So every organization works differently, and refinement and definition of done is probably different from company to company, especially definition of done. And so how I see quality assistant is that not only it is kind of a removal from this wait time that we have with quality engineers that they need to test the software before we can give it to the customers, removing that. It is more and I talk frequently to the quality assistant teams. It's more the awareness of good quality, right? There's kind of a definition of done in there, but that sounds to me like very, very, okay, we just like write it down and this is done, versus the awareness of, okay, this is what you mean by good quality. This is how you test software, right? I'm just like, it's more like if you're familiar with team topologies with the enablement teams, right? That's what quality assistant is doing. It's enabling our developers to become better testers. And at the end, maybe we can remove the quality assistant totally from some developers because they actually get it. They have this, they understand how to write quality code, what quality means in terms of testing. That's probably a skill that the quality assistant people have. But for the easier tasks, we are removing the quality assistant person. So it is kind of just like educating the developers too, to think more like a tester, right? To get this skill, to think more like in terms of good quality. This was a big goal that when we just like implemented quality assistant for us.
So we do have one other question in the chat from Navan. He's asking, in smaller companies, it is always difficult to spare time to spend on the business, which yields fruit in the longer term. Most of the time is spent in firefighting and a little on new features. What can we do to convince the management to allow the teams to spend some more time there, which will help to increase the developer?
Yeah, good question, right? I mean, especially in small companies, yeah, it's important that your services are good, but and up and running. Totally agree, right? And I know that there's a lot of firefighting and hands-on hands-on deck for things like that. But there's something wrong actually, and then that's the thing that you might want to convince your bosses to. You can be much more productive if you invest more time into the developer experience. You can be just getting better if you invest more time in that. And I know, yeah, sometimes it seems pressing to fix those small little nasty things. But sometimes it's also good to take time out. You never improve if you don't take time out. Technical debt is actually the number one thing that developers complain about. And that developers are holding back from being productive. So and people are not spending enough time on managing the technical debt. So this is something that you can just like discuss with your managers. If you just like tackle that, you will be faster at the end. I know it is very convincing to say, oh no, but we have this customer that all want that. But this is, you never get out of the hole. You just like digging yourself deeper into the hole. You never get out of the hole if you don't invest time in getting better, improving your craft, improving your processes, improving your tools, and just like looking a little bit broader and investing time in the nasty things. I know this sounds very fluffy and lofty, but I believe that this is an important thing, and I hope also if you talk to managers, they will get it. At the end, they will get it if you talk to them, and you admit, yeah, we don't want to stop totally on doing that. We just like take some time out, and let's do that as an experiment. Let's see if we can just like get our code review time down by spending more time on better processes for code reviews, and then show them the numbers and say, oh wow, yeah, you're right. You got this code review time down. You now deploy faster to the business. Great, right? Let's do more of those and give you a little bit more time. It's all convincing them with, and they're convinced by numbers. But they need to see. I've never met a CEO, CTO or something that says, no, it's not important to work on processes and better tooling and better processes and technical depth. They all know that this is a problem. Developer experience is on top of mind for most larger organizations. It should be also for smaller.
So taking a look at the time, and then now we are finally going to the last question from Dhaval. So what are your thoughts on the SPACE framework? SPACE, not as how McKinsey interpreted it, but how it laid out in the original ACM article.
Yeah, I think there's a good reason why there's a SPACE framework. We started with the DORA metrics, and then it didn't get broad enough. And the SPACE framework, so that's there are a lot of things in the SPACE framework. If you're familiar with that, there's a lot of stuff in the SPACE framework, and the SPACE framework is great to just like think about it, think about developer experience a little bit. And there are different elements in the SPACE framework, but not all apply to your company. You need to just like take that. It's the same with DORA metrics. Everyone's just like obsessed about DORA metrics, and it's so easy for managers to say, oh, now we just like we are doing the SPACE framework, whatever that means. SPACE isn't really a measurement framework. You need to pick what you need out of the SPACE framework if you read that. And it's so true. There's a reason why there's DORA metrics. And the metrics, and there's a reason why there's SPACE metrics, and there's a reason why you should do this developer surveys, right? And in combination, right, everything in combination makes super sense. But you can't just like take it out of the shelf and say apply it to your organization. Says no, we are good. It's like saying, oh, now we just like installed Jira or just like use Jira, and now we are agile. It's not like this. Really, it's a mindset, and you need to constantly think about these things. Constantly think about just like, what does developer experience mean for us? Where are we as a team, or even as an organization, struggling? And these SPACE frameworks and DORA metrics and developer surveys, they can help you identify some things and give you some ideas, but they will not do the job for you. I talked just recently to some CTO of a company and says, oh, we rolled out DORA to all teams. And I said, oh, great. How did it go, right? Did you improve, right? And they said, yeah, we gave it to all teams, but teams were not paying attention to it, and they didn't improve on anything. They didn't adopt it. Said exactly, because it's not solving their problems. Just like listen to them and listen to what their problems are. And it might be deployment frequency, but if they are convinced and you give that to them and say, oh, you're not deploying as frequently enough, right? And the team says, yeah, we know we have problems with the pipeline, right? Or it's just like too hard to implement changes. But it's just like, these are just like signals. So Space Framework, great. Dora metrics, great. Developer surveys, great. But adopt it to your needs. And it will help you to just like get inspired by improving your developer experience.
And with that, we are at the end of this wonderful session. Thanks a lot, Sven, for spending your wonderful time and also indulging us with such insightful session. And yeah, thank you all to who have joined us today. For anyone who have missed the sessions, please do not fret. All this recording would be available in our YouTube channel. Also, we'll be sharing the link through our social media handles, so be sure to look out for that. Also, join our WhatsApp group for a timely response, and also the reminders so that you do not miss up on any of the upcoming talks. So our next session is going to feature Ari Kaplan discussing the Gen AI on the modern data stack. We hope to see you everyone there. Thanks a lot, everyone. Thank you for tuning.
Thank you.
Thanks, Sven.
Thank you. Bye.
Thanks, Sven. Bye.